The alarm bells rang across the Earth defense vessel Vengeance as Captain Blake Rodriguez stared at his communication console. Something was wrong. The signal coming through space wasn't like anything they had seen before. It was weak, broken up, and filled with static, but there was something about it that made his stomach twist with worry. "What is that noise?" asked his second-in-command, Commander Lisa Park, as she walked onto the bridge. The sound coming from the speakers was unlike human communication. It had a musical quality to it, almost like singing, but underneath the melody was pure terror. Captain Rodriguez had been patrolling the outer edge of human space for 3 years. Out here, beyond the last human colonies, space was supposed to be empty and quiet. They were just supposed to watch for pirates or lost ships. Nobody expected to find aliens calling for help. "Sir, I think I can clean this up," said Communications Officer Tony Wells, his fingers dancing over the controls. The young man had always been good with alien technology, even though they had never officially met any aliens before. Slowly, the static cleared, and what they heard next changed everything. The voice that came through was definitely not human. It sounded like someone speaking through water, with odd clicks and whistles mixed in with words that their computer was trying to translate. But the fear in that voice was something anyone could understand, no matter what planet they came from. "Please," the voice said, and the translation computer made it sound hollow and desperate. "Anyone who can hear this message, we need help. Our worlds are burning. Our people are dying. We are the Zephyrian Collective, and we are peaceful people who have never hurt anyone. But they came with their black ships and their weapons, and they will not stop until we are all dead." The bridge went completely silent. Every person standing there could feel the weight of what they were hearing. These were real people, somewhere out in space, facing the end of everything they had ever known. "They call themselves the Vorthak Empire," the alien voice continued, now sounding even weaker. "They take our worlds not because they need them, but because they enjoy watching us suffer. We have sent messages to every civilization we know, begging for help. But everyone is too afraid to fight them. They are too strong, too cruel. If you are hearing this, please remember that we existed. Remember that we tried to live in peace." Commander Park felt tears in her eyes. "How many of them are there?" Captain Rodriguez was already pulling up star charts on his screen. "Computer, analyze the signal source. Where is it coming from?" The computer's voice was calm and emotionless. "Signal originates from the Kepler 442 system, approximately 47 light-years from current position. Analysis indicates the transmission is being broadcast on all known communication frequencies simultaneously, suggesting extreme desperation." 47 light-years, whispered Navigator Amy Chen. "That's 3 weeks at maximum speed, if our engines don't break down." Communications Officer Wells was still working on the signal when his face went white. "Captain, I'm picking up other transmissions from the same area. But these are different. These are the attackers." The voice that came through next was cold and mechanical. It spoke in perfect human English, which was somehow even more frightening than the alien language. "Attention, unknown vessel intercepting Zephyrian communications. You are advised to ignore their pathetic requests for assistance. The Vorthak Empire claims all territories in this sector. Any interference will result in the complete destruction of your species." Captain Rodriguez felt anger burning in his chest. He had been a soldier for 15 years, and he had never been able to stand by and watch innocent people get hurt. "How did they know we were listening?" "They're monitoring all communication channels," Wells explained. "They want everyone to hear what happens when you cross them. It's psychological warfare." The captain looked around his bridge at his crew. These were good people, brave people, but they were just one ship with 38 crew members. What could they do against an empire that was destroying entire civilizations? "Sir," said Commander Park quietly, "we should contact Admiral Thompson at Fleet Headquarters. This is bigger than anything one ship can handle." Rodriguez nodded and opened a direct communication channel to the flagship Constitution, where Admiral Kevin Thompson commanded the entire human defense fleet. When Thompson's weathered face appeared on the screen, Rodriguez quickly explained what they had discovered. Aliens asking for help against other aliens, Thompson said slowly. And these Vorthak are threatening us too, just for listening. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Behind him, other officers were gathering, listening to the conversation. Admiral, Rodriguez said, they're asking for anyone to help them. Anyone at all. And everyone else in the galaxy has said no. Thompson looked at the star charts his own officers were showing him. 47 light years. We have 63 ships that could make that journey. Not exactly a massive fleet. Sir, it doesn't matter how many ships we have, said Commander Park, stepping forward. These people are about to die, and no one else cares enough to try. Admiral Thompson smiled grimly. He had been waiting his whole career for a moment like this, a chance to prove that humanity stood for something more than just protecting themselves. All ships, prepare for deep space deployment. We're going to show these aliens what humans do when innocent people need help. Captain Rodriguez felt his heart racing with excitement and fear. They were really going to do this. They were going to fly across the galaxy to save people they had never met, people who weren't even the same species. It was crazy, dangerous, and probably impossible. But it was also the most human thing they could possibly do. The human fleet burst out of hyperspace like angry hornets, their ships materializing in flashes of blue light around the Zephyrian homeworld. What Admiral Kevin Thompson saw through his main viewscreen made his blood run cold. The beautiful blue and green planet below was covered in smoke and fire. Massive black ships, each one the size of a small city, were positioned in orbit around the world, their weapons continuously firing down at the surface. My God, whispered Captain Blake Rodriguez, his ship now part of the 63-vessel human fleet. They're not even fighting military targets. They're just burning everything. The Zephyrian planet looked like it was dying. Huge sections of what had once been cities were now glowing craters. The oceans were turning black with ash and debris. But the worst part was what they could see happening in space around the planet. Small, delicate ships that were obviously civilian transports were trying to escape, carrying refugees away from their burning world. The Vorthak fighters were hunting them down like wolves chasing rabbits. Sir, I'm counting at least 40 civilian ships trying to evacuate, reported Communications Officer Danny Walsh from the flagship bridge. The Vorthak are destroying them one by one. They're not even asking them to surrender first. Admiral Thompson had seen a lot of terrible things during his military career, but watching an entire species being systematically murdered was something that made him feel sick. These weren't soldiers fighting soldiers. This was pure genocide, and the attackers seemed to be enjoying it. Open a channel to the Vorthak fleet, Thompson ordered, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. All frequencies. The communication went out across space, transmitted in every language the human computers could manage. This is Admiral Kevin Thompson of the Terran Defense Force. You will immediately cease fire on all civilian targets and withdraw from this system. For a moment, there was silence. Then laughter came through the speakers. Not human laughter, but something cold and cruel that sounded like metal scraping against stone. When the Vorthak commander finally spoke, his words were translated by the human computers, but the arrogance came through perfectly. Unknown species from the primitive world called Earth, the voice said, dripping with contempt. Your databases list your planet as a garden world with no military significance. You have 63 small ships against our 200 warships. Withdraw now, or we will add your pathetic species to our list of extinct civilizations. Captain Lisa Park, commanding the destroyer Relentless, felt her hands tighten on the controls. She had been waiting 3 weeks for this moment, watching the recordings of Zephyrian distress calls and imagining what she would do to the creatures responsible. Admiral, permission to engage. But before Thompson could respond, something happened that changed everything. A small Zephyrian transport, barely bigger than a human shuttle, was trying to escape the planet's atmosphere. It was damaged, leaking atmosphere, and moving slowly. 3 Vorthak fighters were closing in on it, clearly planning to destroy it just for entertainment. Commander Rita Santos, leading the human fighter squadron, didn't wait for orders. All fighters, move to intercept. Protect that transport. Santos, wait for authorization. Thompson called, but it was too late. 20 human fighters screamed past the larger ships, their engines pushing them to maximum speed. The Vorthak pilots had never seen anything like it. Human fighters moved differently than any other species they had encountered. Instead of careful, calculated movements, the humans flew with wild aggression, taking risks that no sane pilot would attempt. The first Vorthak fighter exploded in a ball of fire as Lieutenant Jake Miller's fighter rammed straight into it at full speed. Miller ejected at the last second, his escape pod spinning away into space. The second Vorthak ship tried to turn and run, but Captain Rodriguez's son, Pilot Officer Carlos Rodriguez, was already on top of it, his weapons tearing the alien ship apart. "What are they doing?" the Vorthak fleet commander demanded, watching his fighters get destroyed by these unknown aliens. "They're flying like they don't care if they die." That was exactly right. The human pilots were flying like their lives didn't matter, because to them, saving innocent people was more important than their own survival. It was a concept the Vorthak had never encountered before. "Sir, the humans are protecting the civilian ship," his tactical officer reported. "They're forming a defensive screen around it." On the human flagship, Admiral Thompson watched his pilots risk everything to save one small transport full of alien refugees. He felt proud and terrified at the same time. "All ships, general quarters. We're going to finish what our pilot started." Captain Mike Anderson, commanding the destroyer Defiant, was already moving his ship into attack position when his weapon systems failed. Sparks flew from his control panels as the main guns went offline. He could see a massive Vorthak cruiser moving to destroy a group of Zephyrian transports, and he knew his ship wouldn't be able to stop it with conventional weapons. "Engineering, can you get weapons back online?" Anderson called. "Negative, sir. Main power coupling is fried. It'll take 20 minutes to repair." Anderson looked at the tactical display. In 20 minutes, those refugee ships would be dead. He made a decision that would be talked about for generations. "All hands, brace for impact. We're going in." The Defiant turned toward the Vorthak cruiser and engaged its maximum thrust. The human destroyer was much smaller than the alien ship, but it was moving fast and heading straight for the cruiser's main engine section. "Sir, what are you doing?" his first officer asked. "Saving those people," Anderson replied calmly. The impact was tremendous. The Defiant punched through the Vorthak cruiser's hull like a bullet through paper, both ships locked together in a death spiral toward the planet below. Anderson and his crew had seconds to get to the escape pods before both vessels burned up in the atmosphere. The Vorthak fleet commander stared at his tactical display in complete shock. "They rammed us. They actually rammed us. What kind of insane species are we fighting?" Admiral Thompson's voice came across all channels, cold and determined. "The kind that doesn't back down from bullies. All ships, weapons free. Show them what humans do to people who hurt innocent civilians." The battle for the Zephyrian homeworld had begun, and the Vorthak Empire was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who fights not for conquest, but for justice. The Vorthak heavy cruiser Death's Shadow was spinning helplessly through space, its engines destroyed and hull breached in dozens of places. Black smoke poured from the massive alien ship as Colonel Jake Patterson prepared his Marines for something no human had ever done before, boarding an alien warship in the middle of battle. "Remember, we don't know what their atmosphere is like in there," Patterson told his 50 Marines as they sealed their combat armor. "Could be poison gas, could be acid, could be worse. Trust your suits and keep moving." The Marines climbed into their assault shuttles, small armored craft designed to punch through enemy hulls and deliver soldiers directly into hostile ships. As they approached the crippled Vorthak vessel, they could see alien crew members through the broken windows, frantically trying to repair their ship. 30 seconds to breach, called Pilot Lieutenant Amy Foster. Hold on tight, this is going to be rough. The shuttle slammed into the Vorthack ship's hull like a battering ram, its cutting lasers melting through the alien metal in seconds. The Marines poured through the hole, their boots clanging on the strange deck plating of the enemy vessel. The first thing that hit them was the smell. Even through their sealed helmets, the air recycling systems were picking up traces of the alien atmosphere. It smelled like rotting eggs mixed with burning plastic. The computer displays on their helmet screens immediately flashed red warnings. Atmosphere is 70% methane, 20% hydrogen sulfide, 10% other gases, reported Corporal Tony Kim, reading from his suit sensors. Basically, we're breathing inside a poison gas cloud. Good thing we're human, Patterson replied grimly. Keep moving. The Vorthack crew members they encountered looked like giant lizards walking on two legs, covered in black scales and standing nearly 8 feet tall. They were strong and fast, but they had one major problem: they couldn't believe what they were seeing. How are they moving? One Vorthack warrior hissed to another in their own language, which the human translators were still learning to decode. The atmosphere in this section would kill any normal species in seconds. But humans weren't a normal species. Earth had spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything that lived on it. Humans had evolved to survive in conditions that would destroy most other life forms. They could hold their breath for minutes, fight with broken bones, and keep going long after other creatures would have given up. Sergeant Rita Gonzalez was the first to encounter real resistance. A group of Vorthack soldiers had barricaded themselves in a corridor and were firing energy weapons that turned the metal walls red-hot. The temperature in the hallway quickly rose to over 200 degrees. "Ma'am, the heat readings are off the charts," her squad member warned. "Our armor can only take so much." "Then we better move fast," Gonzalez replied, and charged straight into the burning corridor. The Vorthack couldn't believe it. They watched through their security cameras as the human soldiers ran through temperatures that should have cooked them alive inside their armor. What they didn't understand was that humans came from a planet where the surface temperature could swing from freezing cold to boiling hot in a single day. Private Carlos Santos kicked down a blast door that 3 Vorthack warriors couldn't budge. The aliens stared in shock as the human, who was at least 2 feet shorter than they were, grabbed one of them and threw him across the room like he weighed nothing. "Impossible," the Vorthack commander whispered from his bridge, watching the security feeds. "Their planet is listed in our database as a garden world. How can they be so strong?" What the Vorthack database didn't mention was that Earth's gravity was twice as strong as most inhabited worlds. Every step a human took was like carrying a heavy backpack all the time. When they fought in normal gravity, they were twice as fast and twice as strong as anyone expected. But it wasn't just their physical abilities that shocked the aliens. It was their complete refusal to quit, even when they were hurt. Captain Roy Mitchell was leading his squad toward the engine room when a Vorthack energy blast caught him in the shoulder, burning completely through his armor and into his flesh. The pain was incredible, like being struck by lightning, but Mitchell just gritted his teeth and kept moving. "Sir, you need medical attention," his medic called. "After we finish the job," Mitchell replied, switching his rifle to his good arm. The Zephyrian observers, watching from their damaged space stations, couldn't understand what they were seeing. "How is that human still fighting?" asked Commander Veltar, the leader of their remaining defense forces. "That injury would put one of our warriors in the hospital for weeks." His science officer, studying the human readings, was equally amazed. "Sir, their biology is unlike anything in our databases. They produce chemicals in their bodies that block pain and increase strength when they're injured. It's like they become more dangerous when they're hurt." That was exactly what was happening. The human body's response to injury was to flood the system with adrenaline and endorphins, natural drugs that made people faster, stronger, and able to ignore pain that would cripple other species. Sergeant Lisa Park had been shot twice and was still fighting her way through the Vorthack ship's medical bay when she encountered something that made her stop. Lying on alien operating tables were Zephyrian prisoners, civilians who had been captured during the attack on their world. They had been tortured, experimented on, treated like laboratory animals. The rage that filled Park was unlike anything the Vorthak had ever encountered. Humans didn't just fight for victory, they fought for justice. And when they saw innocent people being hurt, they became something beyond dangerous. "All units, we have prisoners to rescue," Park reported over the radio, her voice deadly calm. "Change of mission priorities." Colonel Patterson, now fighting his way toward the bridge, understood immediately. "Copy that, Sergeant. New objective, save the prisoners first, capture the ship second." Captain Bobby Cruz was the first human to reach the Vorthak bridge, fighting his way past a dozen alien warriors who couldn't understand why their weapons weren't stopping him. Cruz had been hit by energy blasts, beaten with alien weapons, and thrown through a metal wall, but he was still coming. The Vorthak commander looked at this bleeding, battered human soldier and felt something his species rarely experienced, fear. "What are you?" he asked in broken English. Cruz wiped blood from his face and smiled grimly. "We're from Earth. And we don't give up." 20 minutes later, the entire Vorthak ship was under human control. The alien crew had surrendered, unable to comprehend an enemy that got stronger the more you hurt them. The rescued Zephyrian prisoners were being treated by human medics, and the Vorthak Empire had learned its first lesson about fighting humans. They weren't just tough. They were the product of a world that had been trying to kill them for millions of years. And that made them the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever seen. When General Bobby Hayes received the emergency message from Admiral Thompson, he was sitting in his office on Mars, drinking his morning coffee and reviewing routine patrol reports. The message changed everything. Humans were at war with an alien empire, fighting to save a species they had never met before. "How many ships can we get ready in 24 hours? Hayes asked his staff, already knowing the answer wouldn't be enough. 47 vessels, sir," replied his aide, Colonel Lisa Park. "But most of them aren't military ships. We've got mining vessels, cargo haulers, even a few luxury cruise ships whose captains volunteered." Hayes looked at the list and almost laughed. The Asteroid Queen was a mining ship designed to crack rocks, not fight battles. The Happy Wanderer was a passenger liner that normally carried tourists between Earth and the outer colonies. The Iron Mountain was a cargo hauler that had been carrying farming equipment to Mars. "Sir, are we really going to war with a cruise ship?" asked Captain Rita Santos, trying to keep the doubt out of her voice. "We're going to war with whatever we've got," Hayes replied firmly. "Because that's what humans do. We make it work." Within hours, every shipyard in the solar system was working around the clock. The cruise ship Happy Wanderer had missile launchers welded to its observation decks. The mining ship Asteroid Queen had its rock-cutting lasers modified into weapons powerful enough to slice through battleship armor. Even small personal yachts were being fitted with whatever weapons their owners could find. Captain Tony Rodriguez, who normally used his ship to haul grain between Earth and Jupiter, now found himself commanding a vessel that looked like it had been built by crazy people. His cargo holds were filled with missiles, his loading cranes had been turned into weapons platforms, and his navigation computer had been replaced with military targeting systems. "This is insane," his crew chief muttered as they loaded the last of the ammunition. "We're farmers, not soldiers." "Today we're both," Rodriguez replied, checking the weapons one more time. When the reinforcement fleet finally reached Zephyrian space, the original human force was barely holding on. They had managed to save the Zephyrian homeworld, but the Vorthak Empire controlled 12 other star systems, each one filled with conquered worlds and enslaved populations. General Hayes gathered all his commanders for a briefing that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. In the room were ship captains who had been hauling cargo last week, fighter pilots who had been flying passenger shuttles, and Marines who had been working construction jobs on the outer colonies. "The Vorthak Empire thinks they're fighting Earth's military," Hayes began, pointing to the star map showing enemy positions. "They don't realize they're fighting something much more dangerous. They're fighting ordinary humans who are angry. Major Amy Clark had been a police officer on Europa before the war started. Now she was leading special operations missions that made hardened soldiers nervous. Her latest plan involved using the asteroid belt around the fourth planet as a hiding place for her strike teams. "We hide our ships inside the asteroids," she explained to her team. "The Vorthack won't expect an attack from rocks floating in space. When their ships get close, we blow our way out and board them before they know what hit them." It was a crazy plan that violated every rule of space combat. Military doctrine said you fought in open space where you could maneuver. But humans had never been good at following rules, especially when innocent lives were at stake. The plan worked better than anyone expected. Vorthack patrol ships would approach what looked like empty asteroids, only to have human fighters burst out of the rocks like angry wasps. The alien crews, trained to fight in orderly formations, had no idea how to respond to enemies who hid inside floating mountains. Captain Mike Davis, who had been flying tourist shuttles around Saturn's rings before the war, came up with an even crazier idea. The Vorthack had built a massive space station in the Kepler system that served as their command center for the entire region. It was heavily defended and supposedly impossible to attack. "We don't attack it," Davis explained to his squadron. "We crash into it." His plan was simple and terrifying. 20 human fighters would accelerate to maximum speed and punch straight through the space station's outer hull. Most of the pilots wouldn't survive the impact, but the ones who did would deliver a strike team directly into the station's command center. "Sir, that's suicide," protested Lieutenant Carlos Kim. "No," Davis replied calmly. "Suicide is giving up. This is just dangerous." When the attack began, half of Davis's pilots were killed in the initial impact. But the other half made it through, carrying a team of human marines into the heart of the enemy stronghold. Within 2 hours, the most important Vorthack military base in the sector was under human control. The news of the space station's capture spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Vorthack Empire, which had seemed unstoppable for decades, was being defeated by a species that most galactic databases listed as primitive agricultural world, no military significance. But the most important effect wasn't on the Vorthack. It was on the dozens of other species that the Empire had conquered over the years. For the first time in generations, enslaved populations began to believe that freedom was possible. On the world of Altair 7, the conquered Brentari people rose up against their Vorthack overlords. On Vega Prime, the enslaved Kalani workers seized control of the mining stations. Across 12 star systems, species that had given up hope began to fight back, inspired by the example of humans who would fly across the galaxy to help complete strangers. Commander Patricia Johnson found herself in charge of something that had never existed before, a joint command center where humans and aliens worked together to coordinate military operations. The Zephyrians provided intelligence about Vorthack positions, while other freed species contributed whatever ships and weapons they had. "How do we coordinate attacks when we can't even pronounce each other's names?" asked the Zephyrian commander, Beltar. "Same way we coordinate everything else," Johnson replied with a smile. "We figure it out as we go." The Liberation Campaign became a rolling thunder of freedom spreading across the galaxy. Every world the humans freed provided more ships, more fighters, more people willing to stand up to the Vorthack Empire. What had started as one species helping another had become a galactic revolution. The Vorthack commanders, safe in their fortress worlds, watched their empire crumble and couldn't understand what was happening. They had built their power on fear, on convincing other species that resistance was hopeless. But humans had brought something new to the galaxy, the idea that no bully was too big to fight, and no cause was too hopeless to try. The tide had turned, and the Vorthack Empire was about to learn that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can start the biggest wars. Admiral Kevin Thompson stood on the bridge of the Constitution, watching something that nobody in the galaxy had expected to see. The massive Vorthack fortress of Omega Prime, the last stronghold of an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for over a century, was slowly raising white flags of surrender on all its communication towers. "Sir, they're requesting terms," reported Communications Officer Danny Walsh, his voice filled with disbelief. "The Vorthack High Command wants to negotiate." Thompson looked around at his bridge crew, these ordinary humans who had somehow become the liberators of the galaxy. 6 months ago, they had been patrolling empty space on the edge of human territory. Now they were accepting the surrender of the most feared military force in known space. "Tell them the terms are simple," Thompson said quietly. "Complete withdrawal from all occupied systems, release of all prisoners, and reparations for the worlds they destroyed. Non-negotiable." The Vorthack response came back within minutes, transmitted in their own language but somehow sounding defeated even before the computer translated it. "Terms, accepted. The Empire formally surrenders to the Terran Defense Force and its allies." Across the galaxy, celebrations erupted on dozens of worlds that had been under Vorthack control just days before. On the Zephyrian homeworld, millions of people poured into the streets, singing songs of freedom that their species hadn't sung for 50 years. On Altair 7, the Brentari people were rebuilding their cities with help from human engineers. On Vega Prime, former slaves were learning to be free again. But the victory celebrations couldn't hide the fact that everything had changed. The galaxy had learned that there was a new power in space, one that operated by rules nobody had ever seen before. Humans didn't conquer for profit or territory or resources. They fought for something much more dangerous, they fought for ideals. 2 weeks after the surrender, Ambassador Lisa Park found herself in the strangest meeting of her career. She was sitting in a conference room on the Zephyrian homeworld, surrounded by alien diplomats from 17 different species, all wanting to sign defense agreements with humanity. "We don't understand your motivations," said Veltar, the Zephyrian representative who had become something like humanity's first alien friend. "Your species traveled across the galaxy to save people you had never met. You risked extinction to help strangers. Why?" Captain Blake Rodriguez, now promoted to admiral after his role in the First Contact, had scars across his face from boarding 4 different enemy ships during the war. He looked at the assembled aliens, some tall, some short, some with scales, some with feathers, all of them trying to understand what made humans different. "Because it was the right thing to do," Rodriguez said simply. "We heard people calling for help, and we came. That's what neighbors do." The translator struggled with the concept of neighbors when applied to species living dozens of light years apart, but the meaning came through clearly enough. To humans, anyone who needed help was a neighbor worth saving. The Kalani ambassador, representing a species that had been enslaved for 30 years, leaned forward with curiosity. "But you gained nothing from this war. Your people died, your ships were destroyed, your resources were spent. What was the benefit to humanity?" Admiral Rodriguez thought about all the human pilots who hadn't made it home, all the Marines who had died boarding enemy ships, all the civilian volunteers who had converted their cargo haulers into warships and never lived to see the victory. Then he thought about the Zephyrian children playing in rebuilt cities, the former slaves learning to read and write, the dozens of species that were free to determine their own futures. "The benefit," he said slowly, "is that we can sleep at night knowing we did the right thing." The aliens exchanged glances, their translators working overtime to convert the concept of moral satisfaction into their various languages. It was a motivation they had never encountered before in galactic politics, and it scared them almost as much as it impressed them. General Bobby Hayes, now in charge of establishing permanent human defense positions throughout the galaxy, was dealing with a problem no military commander in history had faced before. Dozens of species were volunteering to join human defense forces, not because they were conquered or forced to, but because they wanted to be part of something that stood for justice. "Sir, we have 17 different species asking to serve on human ships," reported Colonel Rita Santos. "They want to learn how we fight, how we think, how we make decisions in combat." Hayes looked at the applications. Former Vorthack slaves wanted to serve alongside the humans who had freed them. Peaceful species that had never known war were asking to learn military tactics. Even some former Vorthack soldiers, disgusted by their empire's cruelty, were requesting to join the human forces. We'll take volunteers, Hayes decided. But they need to understand something first. We're not building an empire. We're building a defense force. There's a difference. The difference was becoming clear across the galaxy. Human defense stations weren't bases for conquest, they were shelters for the weak. Human fleets didn't patrol space looking for worlds to conquer, they responded to distress calls from anyone who needed help. Commander Patricia Johnson was working at the First Joint Command Center, coordinating between human forces and the defense fleets that other species were now building for themselves. The Zephyrians had designed beautiful ships that could evacuate entire cities in hours. The Brentari had created mobile repair stations that could fix battle damage in deep space. The Kalani had developed communication systems that could coordinate fleets across multiple star systems. We're not the only protectors anymore, Johnson observed to her staff. We're teaching other species to protect themselves. That was the real victory. The humans hadn't just defeated the Vortak Empire, they had inspired dozens of species to stand up for themselves and each other. The galaxy was becoming a place where bullies couldn't survive, because there were too many people willing to fight them. 6 months after that first distress call, humanity had become something unprecedented in galactic history. They were the species that other species called when everything went wrong. They were the friends you wanted to have, the enemies you never wanted to make, and the neighbors who would cross the universe to help you move your furniture. The age of human peacekeeping had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Because sometimes, the most revolutionary thing you can do is simply care about people you've never met, and be willing to risk everything to help them. And that, more than any weapon or technology, made humanity the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever seen.